Okay, in this video we're going to look at using Grasshopper to make thin shell structure, a Candela-esque structure. He actually designed and built a nightclub in Acapulco similar to this, what we see here in Rhino. So we're looking at geometry that was created in Rhino, and we're going to go ahead and recreate this geometry in Grasshopper so that it's parametric. And I have a definition already made here, and you can see that overlaid on the Rhino geometry. And some things we can do with this, if I just go ahead and hide what's in Rhino. Okay, now what we're looking at is more of a saddle shell. It has a dip here in the middle, but we can change that to more of an arc type shell if I raise this vertical line here. And I also have control of this line here if I bring that down a little bit, so we can change the shape of this shell. Okay, so let's get started with this. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new document here in Grasshopper. Let me unhide what I had in Rhino. Okay, and we'll just use this as a guideline to follow. So the first thing we're going to need, you see this base triangle that was made in Rhino. So I'm going to go ahead and make that in Grasshopper using a polygon. And I'm going to need a number slider to control the radius of the polygon and the number of sides. So I'm going to bring out a number slider. And I can right click on this and I can set it to be integers. And let me double click on this. Let's go ahead and name this one. So this one is going to control the radius, and I'm going to set the range to be 120 because that's the largest value I'm going to need in this definition. Okay, and we'll plug this in for the radius, and let's go ahead and set our radius value to 60. By default it creates a hexagon with 6 sides, so we're going to copy and paste this, and this will be our number of sides. We'll plug that into the S for the polygon, and we only need 3 sides. Okay, so this is, I'll start labeling this stuff. So this is going to be our triangle. And you see that they're not quite lining up, the Grasshopper triangle versus the Rhino triangle. So I just need to rotate this Grasshopper triangle. I just need to rotate it 90 degrees to meet this other one. So I'm going to go ahead and bring out a rotate component. And the geometry that I'm going to rotate is this polygon that we made. And I have 2 inputs. I have my rotation angle, and I have my rotation plane, which is by default the XY plane. So that'll be fine. So copy and paste one of these number sliders. And this will be my rotation angle, and that's going to be 90 degrees. Okay, so I'm thinking of this in degrees, but the rotate is looking for a number in radians. So I need a component that converts degrees to radians. That component is called radians, and I'll go ahead and plug my degrees in. Outputs my radians, and there you have the rotated triangle. So I'm going to turn off the original polygon just to get that out of the way. Okay, so this is our beginning. I'm going to go ahead and select all of this and Control G to group it together, and I can change the color of it by having it selected and right clicking on it. And let's go ahead and change its color. Okay. So the next thing I need to do is divide this triangle up. So I'm going to bring out my scribble here, label as we go. So this is dividing the triangle. Okay, so I can bring out a divide curve component, and the curve that I want to divide is my last component here, which created my triangle. I can plug that into the C, and by default it gives me 10 divisions, so I can copy and paste the number slider. Okay, and I'll rename this number of divisions. And I'm going to plug that in, and we're going to set that to 6. Okay, and we have things lining up with the rhino geometry. Now I'm going to call out those points so that I know how they're labeled or numbered inside a Grasshopper. So I can do that by bringing out a point list, and I'll plug my points coming out of the divide component into the P for points, and this should display numbers on those points, but it needs something to control the font size. So I'm just going to reuse this number slider here. Okay, and now you see those point numbers: 0, 1's hiding back there, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so this is our divide triangle. Go to Control G and group this together. Change its color. Okay, now the next thing I need to do is I need to be able to call out these points individually. So I'm going to do that with a bunch of list items. So let's change this to list items. And I'm going to use every point except 0. So I need a list item for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So let's just start with our first one. So I'm going to bring out a list item, and I'm going to copy and paste this number slider, rename it item number, and I'm going to set it to 1. And my list of points is coming out of my divide P. Okay, and I'll just set this up. Okay, so now if I click on this list item, okay, I should see point 1 is active here. And as we add these, we'll be able to access these points. So I'm going to copy and paste this, Control C, Control V, set this one to 2, highlights point 2, Control C, Control V, set this one to 3, highlights point 3, and so on. So 3, 4, and the final one, 5. So now I have all 5 of my points called out. I can group this together, change its color. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create this vertical line here that you see in Rhino. So I can do that here in Grasshopper by double clicking and bringing out a line that's a start, direction, and length. And the start of it is going to be from point 3. So I'll plug that into the S. The direction by default is in the Z axis, so I don't have to worry about that. But I can create a number slider, copy and paste one for the length. Okay, and change that to length. Plug that into the L. And you see as I increase this length, highlight that line in green. Okay, so that's being controlled there, so I'll just make it 25 feet for now. Okay, so I have this line. I need a point on the end of this line so that I can make a 3-point arc from 2 to the end point of this line and down to 4. So I can use an start endpoint component. I'm going to just type in end and plug this in, and I now have access to a point at the start and the end. I really just need the end of that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a 3-point arc now. So arc 3-point, put this up here, and that's going to be starting from 2. Here's my second point. So from 2 to this end point and back down to 4, my fourth item. And there you see that 3-point arc. Okay, I'm going to need this later on. We're going to do a surface from edges. So I'm just going to highlight my components that are going to be used in that surface from edges. So I'm going to Control G this, change its shape, change its color to red. Okay, so we have that. Now we need another arc that we have to make, and let me go ahead and hide my geometry in Rhino. Okay, so you see we have this arc right here. I want to go ahead and make that. So I have point 2, and what I need a couple vertical lines here. And I'm going to kind of go the long way around this just to introduce some other types of things you can do in Grasshopper. So I'm going to recreate these diagonal lines. So I have that line and I have that line. So select both of those together. So I'm going to make those 2 diagonal lines. So a line from 2 to 5 and 1 to 4. So let me go ahead and group this together just to keep this in order. So actually let me label this. So this is a vertical line from point 3. Okay, I can group this. Okay, now I'm going to make a couple diagonal lines, so I'm going to bring my scribble down. And I'm just going to use a line component. So again, from 2 to 3, so I have my list items in order, so from 2 to 5. Okay, just deselecting the Rhino geometry. So there's from 2 to 5, and now I can copy and paste that and go from 1 to 4. Okay, so now I'm going to use a component that finds or solves for the intersection of these 2 lines, this one and this one. And I can find that under the Intersect tab here in Grasshopper. Under Mathematical, we have a line on line, and that'll give me a point at the intersection of those 2 lines. So I'll plug this into A and this into B, and then these are my outputs, a point on line A or a point on line B. Doesn't really matter. Okay, I can draw a vertical line from that point. So I can, these are my diagonal lines. I can go ahead and group this together. And we'll change its color. And now we're going to create our vertical line from the intersection. And I can do that using or reusing these components. So let me grab this entire group, Control C and Control V, drag this down. So this is our vertical from intersection. Okay, so what's really important here is the start point of this. So that start point is going to come off of this intersection. So I can plug in PA. Okay, and just to see that in Rhino, in that Rhino window there, I'm just making it really tall. So we'll set that to about 40 feet. Okay, so I have that line. Now I want to create this arc. So I just need one more point right here. So I need a vertical line that I can put a point on the end of it. So I can again once more copy this geometry, move this down, and this will be my vertical from point 5. And I need to change its start point. So I can change that to be from point 5, my last list item. And the length of these two lines, I want those to always be the same, so I should just use one number slider. So I can get rid of this one. And now this will control both lines. Okay, so I can create my second arc. So I'm going to double click and type an arc, and I'm going to use an arc 3-point. Okay, and it's going to go from 2 to this point to this point. So the first point is from list item 2, and then from this endpoint to this endpoint. And there you see the arc here in green. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to be able to have this arc only go to this point, not keep going beyond. Because in Grasshopper, in this version, I can't do a network surface. So I have to actually have these arcs trimmed to create my surfaces, because they're going to define the edges. So this will introduce us to evaluating this arc that we've just drawn. I need another point along it. So I'm going to bring down another scribble, and we're going to evaluate this arc. And we'll do that with an evaluate curve. And we're going to plug that arc into the C for curve. And we need to set up our T parameter. So this curve is going from 0 to 1. So let's go ahead and plug a number slider in. So I'm going to create a new one because I want this to be in decimal. And I'm going to set up the range from 0 to 1, so that's already there for us. So I'm going to plug this into the t parameter, and I'm going to click on this evaluate curve, and I'm going to slide this around, and you see it's not moving very far. So what I need to do is re-parameterize this arc from 0 to 1. So I can do this by right clicking on the C and choose re-parameterize, and now this is moving from 0 to 1, being at the end. Let me highlight that. Okay, so I'm just going to set a point. Doesn't really matter where, as long as it's before this one. So I have that there, and group this together. Okay, so this actually becomes an old arc that I won't need to use anymore, because we're going to recreate one. So I'm just going to name this. Okay, so I need to draw a new arc now. It's going to go from point 2 to the point we just evaluated, and then to the point on the end of this line. So let's bring out, so this is going to be our new arc now. Bring out a 3-point arc. Okay, so it's going to go from, I'll move this over, it's going to start from our list item number 2, and it's going to go to this point, which is from our vertical intersection. Or actually no, it's going to go from our evaluate point, and then the last point will be from this vertical intersection. Okay, this is going to be our new arc. Let's hide the old arc so we don't see that anymore. Okay, so there we go. We have that arc trimmed. Okay, let me hide some of this rhino geometry now. Okay, so we just need now to mirror this to the other side, and we can do that along this YZ axis. So I'm going to need this for my edge surface, so I want to select it and group it together, and I'll make its color red. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and mirror this arc over. So I can use a mirror component. The geometry that I'm going to mirror is this new arc. The plane that I'm going to mirror about is the YZ plane. So I'm going to bring out a YZ plane. And there you have it. That's mirrored over. So I now have all of my edges. And I'm going to highlight this last edge. This is my last edge. I'll highlight it as a group in red. Okay, so now I can make my surface from edges. So that's going to be an edge surface. Okay, now the order that I plug these in is important. Okay, so I'm going to start with my new arc, plug that into A, and then the last edge that I made I'm going to plug into B, and then we're missing this first arc that we made, which should be out here highlighted in red. So we're going to plug this guy in into C. Okay, so there we're getting the first part of our shell. Now let's raise this vertical line up taller to make sure that this is working correctly. So that's the vertical line from point 3. Yeah, so that's creating our saddle. And that had to do with the order that we plugged into the edge surface. Okay, the last thing that we need to do is we need to make a polar array. Okay, so that we can array this 2 more times around the center of that polygon. Okay, so this was our edge surface. Okay, so last thing we need is our polar array. Double click on this and name it. Okay, so to create this polar array we need a series component. And what that's going to do for us is it's going to allow us to use the count for the number in our array. So we're going to have 3 of these. And then the distance or angle we need to set for the array is 360 divided by 3, which will be 120 degrees. So we need a couple of number sliders, a couple of integer number sliders. So I'll take this one, copy and paste it. Okay, so this will be our count, and we're going to copy and paste that, and now we need our angle. And I'm going to set this to 120. And our count should be 3. Okay, so we have our series. The next thing we need to complete the array is we need a rotation. So we have some of this set up in the beginning of the definition, so we can go ahead and copy and paste that. So here we have our radians already set up and our rotate. So I can Control C and Control V and drag this over to the end of our definition. Okay, so the geometry that we're going to be arraying comes from the edge surface, so I'll plug that into the G for rotate. The angle and count is coming from the series, so that's going to get plugged in, and that's being output in degrees, 120 degrees. So I'm going to plug that into my degree side of this radians component. Okay, and there's the polar array. And we can go ahead and group this together and change its color. Okay, so that completes the shell structure, and right now we're showing it as a saddle, but we'll see that we can change the look of this curve just by editing either the vertical coming from the intersection, if I raise that value up, okay, and I can lower that first arc coming from point 3 and drop that down, and we can change its form. I like to leave it as a, saddle. So I'll bring that back up and lower the one from the intersection.